You're worth it. All right. So again, continuing our smorgasbord, our scattered thoughts, of which I tried to list the highlights on the little blurb. This actually has nothing to do with going out. This is when you are married, but I just felt it was worthwhile to put in so you keep this in mind when you're going out. Is this the type of person that would do it? It's a really beautiful thing when a husband and wife learn together. I'm not going to pretend my husband and I learn together regularly because, you know, I don't want to pretend something that's not true. Over our married career, we have learned together at various points, and it's always very, very special. And definitely I pick his brains whenever I need to, which is great. But it's really a wonderful thing. Don't be like me, be better. And to learn regularly with your husband. It's just a beautiful bridge. The bridge of Torah, the bridge of really, really bringing Hashem in. And again, it's something even as you're going out in the back of your head, if you absorb this value, is this the type of person that would want to talk Torah to me, that I, you know, would be able to communicate with him on that level? Because it's just a really, really, really great builder between a husband and wife. And even some couples I know that I counsel that have troubles in their marriage, not engaged and not married, but troubled married, and they often actually find that when they learn together, it's one of the most therapeutic things to do in their marriage. I don't know why. I'm just saying a fact. I'm not going to explain it. Maybe because it brings in your third partner, Hashem. I don't know. Maybe because the neutral ground that you could talk about that doesn't have any, you know, hidden bombs in it. I don't know, but somehow it seems to work.
You can always find a hidden bomb, even when you're
even in Torah.
Yeah, any way you can.
It's
you know,
true. That's true, Froma. That's true. That's true. If there's stress in a relationship, the bombs could be, anything could trigger. You're right. But certain things are more likely to trigger. Certain things, shopping, needs, expenses, all those things. Woo! What we're going to do we're going to my parents, your parents. Woo! Torah's starting off at least, hopefully, neutral.
Yeah, good time. It's a good quality time. Definitely.
It is. And it's a bringing Hashem and the two of you together quality time, which is really nice. And this is also something, again, I'm not saying you're going out has to become a sheer, but it's nice when you're going out to talk a little bit on this level, just to like get a feeling for, is he comfortable talking with you about Torah? Again, I'm not saying that's the make it or break it factor in a shidduch. It's just a nice thing. Now, we spoke before about disclosing personal information when you're going out on the shidduch. You know, at what do you have to, at what point should you? I know we spent a long time talking about it, but I just wanted to bring in a little bit more because from more a halachic aspect, which I didn't do before, sometimes when I think of these things that I didn't say, I just add them to the notes, like for the next time I give these classes, at whatever point they'll all be nicely organized. But here I felt it was important enough that instead of making my notes look better and putting it back with the other section, I wanted to bring this in now because I wanted to make sure you heard it. So when you have something private, which is something about your past life, something medical, or anything else that's embarrassing information or might impede a shidduch information, it's truly a halachic isser. In other words, this becomes a halachic shaila. It becomes something to ask a rabbi. And there's the isser of ona'ah. Ona'ah is, in English, deception. So deception is pretty severe, but there's also something even more severe that could happen if someone would withhold significant, that the other party would consider significant information. And that's what's called a mekach ta'os. What a mekach ta'os means is a purchase based on fraudulent information is not binding. If you bought a car, you bought a used car, and the owner said it runs perfectly. Accident, never had an accident. You're not smart enough to look up the VIN number. You take his word for it. He looks so honest. And then you start driving it, and it doesn't drive beautifully at all, and you look up the VIN number then and find out it was in 2 accidents. Well, according to halacha, if the other person was from and would listen to a rav or a din Torah, this is called the mekach ta'os. The sale is void. the whole thing falls apart because it was bought on fraudulent information. So among the sages, it's discussed this concept. If someone gets married based on fraudulent information, he thought you were this, but you're actually this. He thought this never happened to you, but this actually happened to you. Whatever, all those types of things. Now, we don't want to say, God forbid, the marriage is dissolved, because that could create a tremendous question on the legitimacy of the children and things along those lines. But it's very close to that. It's considered a very, very, very dangerous situation. If it was extreme misinformation, there would literally be room to say the marriage is null and void. Obviously, that's an extreme situation, but there could be extreme situations, and because it's so extreme, that's why I don't want to tell them. And it could literally halakhically make the marriage null and void. Now, again, it's actually weird because I heard whatever. You know, the more you hear, the more you hear. So I'm now hearing about this supposedly Orthodox rabbi that he just makes marriages null and void so the woman doesn't need a get, which is a little bit strange. And then what happens to the legitimacy of the children, and what's happening to the future children she's going to have, and is his psak really valid? So it's a pretty big and weird radical thing that this rabbi has made a number of marriages null and void. So I'm saying it's not usually done. Even in this situation, it's not usually done. But the fact that in theory it could be done just shows you how enormously significant it is, and how enormously important it is to have a full disclosure. As we discussed earlier, of course, we discussed this at the appropriate time. The only information you're allowed to hide, halachically, according to Jewish law, is if you know that if the other person knew it, he wouldn't mind it. Then why are you hiding it? I don't know, whatever, it just didn't come out for you to say it. But if you know that if he found out he wouldn't mind, then you're not transgressing anything by hiding it. But if he heard about it, he would mind, then you are. And so, yeah, so therefore, obviously, on the other hand, if someone's calling you for a reference, keeping these laws in place, you know, avoid embellishing facts, which people have a tendency to do, and definitely don't lie. And I always feel there's no point in it anyway. Like, for me, like with my own children, I am so brutally honest about them when I'm talking in terms of shadchanim or anything along those lines, because I'm like, what's the point? I want this to be appropriate. You know, I want you to know exactly what you're getting. I don't want you to go out with my son if you think he's something he's not. I want you to know what he is. Hi, Simcha. But unfortunately, a lot of people somehow don't have my approach on these things. If a woman, for example, is assumed to be a virgin and she's not, this could definitely be considered something that is a very big fact that should have been said. It definitely impacts the ksuba. It impacts, therefore, what's happening to the chuppah. It impacts who she can marry in certain situations. A kohen cannot marry a woman who had relationships with someone usur, someone forbidden, which would be a relative, like if, God forbid, there was incest. A married man, a non-Jew, a mamzer. If a woman had relationships with any of those people, any of those categories, she would not be allowed afterwards to marry a kohen.
What about if it was just with a regular person, like a regular Jew, and because I actually know someone, who wasn't a virgin when she got married to her husband, but he's a kohen.
That's okay. As long as it wasn't any of these four categories. If it was any of these four categories, he loses his kahuna. Meaning, if a woman had relationships with a sibling, or, you know, I'm saying any of these horrible things that sometimes happen to people, or with a married man, or with a goy, or with a mamzer, and then she married a kohen, the kohen would be losing his kahuna by being married to her. If she just had relationships before, but with a kosher Jew that she was allowed to have relationships with, then he doesn't.
I mean, it's not allowed.
I understand it wasn't within the framework of marriage, but it doesn't put her in that category of a woman that's forbidden to marry kohen.
Okay.
In other words, it's a valid question. In other words, the only kohen that would have that situation would be a kohen gadol, right? The high priest has to marry basula, but only a kohen gadol. A regular Kohen does not. So
What
even
about,
though she did something wrong, 100% she did something wrong. She had relationships out of the context of marriage, but it wasn't as wrong because the person she was having relationships with, in essence, she could have had relationships with if only she was married to him. As versus in these 4 categories where she's never allowed to have relationships, and therefore it took her out of that category.
what about a raped woman?
So that's a very interesting question. So I actually had a situation like this. I had such a situation once. Just one second. Sorry, I just had a child too nearby. So I was involved with a situation with a girl I was very close to, who had been assaulted by her brother several times, and when she was a child, and now she's a regular girl. I didn't even know, like I'm saying, it wasn't anything that she wore on her sleeve in any way. And she got engaged to someone, and she had no clue he was a Kohen. She knew the laws, but his name wasn't like Cohen or anything like that. She had no clue he was a Kohen. And it somehow came out when she was engaged, and she like panicked. Like, oh my gosh, and had to explain to him, and she totally panicked. And she spoke to me, and in the end, she was connected with a Rav, a very big Rav in this area, who she explained the case to, and he paskined that in her case, since she was assaulted, it wasn't willing, that therefore it didn't remove her from the it didn't put her in this status, and therefore it was okay for her to marry her husband. I'm not saying that's a blanket psak for everyone. You have to be very, very, very careful on these issues, because this is literally, very severe issues. But that was the situation she was in. Meaning, obviously, if she had known he was a Kohen, she would not have agreed to go out with him, but she didn't know. And that's why it happened. And then she found out, everything was the hand of God. She didn't know when she was going out. And when she was engaged, she found out. And Baruch Hashem, she connected to this very, very big Rav who has broad enough shoulders to give her such a psak.
Isn't that something you should discuss, though, before getting engaged?
I'm not going to go there. That's a separate issue. Probably on some level, yes. Allude to it for sure. But obviously she wasn't a Masula. That's that. I'm just answering your question because I'm saying, yeah. So that was the answer in that situation. But again, I'm not saying it's a carte blanche answer for everyone. But if anybody was in the situation, at least I know the Rav that you could turn to, that someone could turn to for these types of questions. But again, it's a big question, and I'm not saying it's the answer for everyone. In her specific situation, with the details she gave him, which probably had to do with her age as well as the situation, that's what he paskined. But these are just, obviously very severe things, and therefore obviously something that on some level, yeah, this was sort of my point, that on some level needs to be in an appropriate, tactful, discreet way disclosed in advance. But obviously only at the right time, and obviously very, very, very discreetly, tactfully, with sneas. Not with anything explicit, but just saying words that are understood to mean what they mean. Any other questions on this? Okay. Now, obviously, what I'm saying, just obviously to put this out here, obviously the same way a woman should, in a discreet, modest, sneeze fashion, say things that the other person deserves to know in advance, obviously a man should as well. I mean, I was talking from the woman's end, which I'm talking as a woman to women, but obviously this goes in both directions, and both sides have an obligation that the marriage should not be based on ona'ah, on deception, and the marriage should not be a mekartos, should not be dissolvable because it was with false information, purchase, a transaction of false information. So therefore, from both sides, the man and the woman, there's the obligation to, in a tznius fashion, in the right time, obviously, to say whatever has to be said. When you do get engaged, Mazel Tov, it's not appropriate to delay the marriage. I do think we mentioned this, but I wasn't sure if we really spoke about it at all. I think we did. But you want as short an engagement as possible. First of all, you want as short an engagement as possible because it's very hard on the couple being engaged. It's a really hard time. It's not a fun time at all. It's the most unfun time is when you're engaged. A lot of times when engagements stretch on too long and when the couple see each other too often, both of those factors, there's a lot of broken engagements. The ideal thing is when you are engaged, be as short as possible and see him and speak to him as little as possible. So you could see, so a person could say, like, what? You're scared I'm going to get to know him too well. I'm going to be married to him for the rest of my life. But it doesn't work that way. Once you're married, there's a commitment. He's yours. You're his. This is it. This is life. And guess what? If you didn't know he was flawed before, trust me, you will find out he's flawed. And he will find out you're flawed. And that's fine. We're humans. It's okay that we're not perfect. If he was perfect, it would be intimidating because you're not perfect. So that's fine. But when you're engaged and your hormones are racing like crazy and you're impossible to live with, trust me, and you have all these pressures and tensions inside of you because you're only making this huge decision, which is about your whole life. So any little thing can trigger you, and any little thing can trigger him. More often it's on the woman's side, but I've also seen it on the men. I've seen it on both. So therefore, you want as short an engagement as possible. You want as little contact, as little being together, seeing each other, talking to each other as possible, because it's very difficult. And the more you see and the more you talk, it just makes you nutsier and nutsier and nutsier. Now, if someone has high anxiety when they're going out, it might be well to see a therapist for help. Because I've just seen this. I had these two huge things. I mean, in situations I was very close to girls. Like recently, like boom, boom, I actually connected the two together, which was a great strategy that really helped the second one. But sometimes when people have anxiety, you have anxiety, and it's come out in these. Whatever your life has been, maybe when you were getting into college or getting into seminary or going through it or job applications, it comes and then it goes. Not daily intense anxiety, but you have it as part of your psyche. It's one of your issues that you don't deal with so much because it doesn't come up so much. Suddenly you're going out, you're getting engaged, and then whoa, the anxiety is taking over really in a way that paralyzes you, and really in the way that stymies you, and really in a way that you can't get engaged or you can't get married because of it. And if someone's going through something like that, they should see a good therapist who specializes in these issues, because a good therapist can be really helpful. I'm saying I had this experience in the summer for weeks with a girl who was engaged, and I just literally felt I was holding her hand and pushing her to get under that chuppah, and boom, the day after she was like so happy, has been so happy ever since. It was just getting her to that point. And now recently with another girl as well. So it's a hard time being engaged. It's a very hard time being engaged. And people that have some such issues, some such weaknesses in them, this is prime time for them to come out and make you crazy. So it's good for it to be short. It's good for you to see and speak as little as possible. And on the other hand, what also happens on the flip side is that sometimes, and especially if you see and speak too much, and especially if it's too long, there's a big breakdown in sneeze between the couple. It happens as well. I mean, like, you're already engaged. So even a girl and a boy who are careful and are frum and would never do anything, but when you're engaged, it feels like, you're almost married. Come on. This is going to be the person for you the rest of your life. And therefore, unfortunately, sometimes people, even people that didn't do it in any other situation, break down and do wrong things. And the repercussions of that can last them for years and years and years of their married life. When they started off the relationship not kosher, not doing it Hashem's way, the repercussions for that, the lack of shalom bias because of that, the difficulties in that area literally last for years and years and years and years and years and years. So it's important to be very careful, guarding yourself intently during that time, because it's very easy and a lot of people fall. It's very easy to fall. A lot of people fall. So, you know, your brain sort of warps and convinces you it's not real. Maybe it's not good, but it's not really bad. Not he'll be kosher tomorrow. Why isn't he kosher today? So that's another reason why it's good to have short engagements, and it's good not to spend too much time together. And if you are spending time together and your engagement is slipping on, just please, 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 for you or for anyone else you know, tell them it's not worth it. It's not worth messing up your marriage over this. It's totally, totally not. Sometimes persons going out and they think he's the one, but they're still not 100% sure. And they just literally want another set of eyes to check him out. Now, obviously, that's a great time to do more research. And I know I've mentioned this before. Often the most productive research I've ever seen happens when you're going out. Because when you're going out, you know the questions to ask. You know your questions. You know the issues you're interested in. And therefore, you can ask very good questions that would really give you the information you need. So it could be that that's a good time to do more research, because the research will help. But sometimes you don't need more research. You know, you just want somebody else to reassure you he's really a good guy that you trust. Who would be the right person to turn to at that point? Your Rav. Not your parents, not your aunts, not your cousins, not your grandparents, but your Rav. And you could ask your Rav to have him for a Shabbos meal. And it's even appropriate for you to go with him to the Rav's house, for him to be more comfortable, it doesn't feel so awkward, and have a Shabbos meal together at your Rav's house to give the Rav an opportunity to observe him. Obviously, you could say, well, I mean, anyone could put on a show for an hour and a half meal. True, but the hope is that a Rav has siyata d'shmaya, and that the Rav, hopefully a good Rav, has learned to be a very keen observer of human nature, because that's the material they deal with. So putting those two facts together, hopefully the Rav will be able to give you afterwards a thumbs up and say he thought he was really a good person, which is sometimes what you need to hear. Sometimes, hopefully this shouldn't happen to you, but sometimes you're going out with someone, and I'm talking now for a girl about a man, and he doesn't have a job. He doesn't really know what he's doing with his life. That's not a good situation. Now, again, if he's learning in yeshiva, and his goal after marriage is to learn in kollel, so that's fine. He knows what he's doing with his life. He's learning. That's fine. He's not committing to eternity, but it's fine if he's learning now in yeshiva and he's going to get married and learn in kollel for a year or 2 or 3 or whatever's acceptable in your circles, whatever's the norm that he and you both want. It's fine if he doesn't know what his career is going to be afterwards. That's fine. But if he's not in yeshiva, or even if he is in yeshiva, but he's not planning on going to kollel, and he doesn't really have a game plan, that's concerning. He doesn't necessarily have to have accomplished his game plan, but he should have a sense of where he's going in his life and what he's going to be doing. He should have some clarity of direction, and that's important. And if he doesn't, that would be something that would be concerning to me. Why doesn't he? And what is he planning on doing with himself? Sorry, I know one of the downsides of Zoom is it's hard to ask questions. Anyone has any questions they want to articulate or send up as a chat, personal or to the group? Okay. For more important, I would say for girls, more importantly for boys, it's really good if he comes from a good home. Again, sometimes you can't get it, and he's a great guy, and he's worth it, And I understand if someone's worth it, they're worth it, and they're worth it. Don't worry about it. They're worth it. They compensated. But in the world of theory, I believe because for a woman, women naturally think about the subject, go to classes, learn, discuss with other women. So we have more developed a sense of chinuch marriage. We have more developed an awareness of what's a good marriage, how to create a good marriage, how to be a good wife, how to be a good spouse. It's our interest zone. But a lot of men don't think about it at all until they're married. Even then, sometimes they don't think about it. And they don't take classes on it. They don't go to shiurim on it. And, it's not their space. It's much more woman's space. So for such a man, how is he supposed to be a good husband? The best bet is if he had a father who was a good husband. Because he was raised then not really paying attention, because he wasn't, but it's just in the air. This is how he knows how a husband and wife interact. Because this is how he was raised, how his parents interacted. So if his parents have a good marriage, it's a tremendous, I can't think of the right word for it. It adds tremendously to our assumption that he's going to be a good husband. And especially if he has a good relationship with both of his parents. So if his parents have a good relationship with each other, and he has a good relationship with both of his parents, it's probably assumed that he will be a good husband. Now again, he could not be. But at least it's in his genes. At least it's in his psyche of how a husband and wife relate. If a man's coming from parents that didn't have such a great marriage, and he also doesn't have such a great relationship with his parents, it's harder. He has to create the wheel on his own. I'm not saying that therefore you shouldn't marry him. Maybe he's the best of the best, and because of that, he became the best of the best, and because of that, he is much more into it and cares more than anyone else. It is just something to be aware of, that his family really does make a difference, and it's worthwhile if you have the luxury of choice to find out about it. I'll close my phone that keeps getting away. Now, a lot of times, sorry, I thought I could get away with pressing one button without having to actually open my phone. Now, a lot of times this is a very long process. Like it schleps and schleps. It schleps and schleps and schleps, and a name comes up, and you reject the name, or they reject you, or it never even gets to the point of rejection. It's just obviously so ludicrous that they're not going to say yes to you, or you have absolutely no interest in saying yes to them, or you go out and it's the wrong one, and you think it's the right one, and he says no, or you're not sure, or you go out some more. It's such a long, difficult process. And of course we know, but I wanted to share a Hasidic story on this idea, that each time when a name comes up and doesn't work out, when you go out and doesn't work out, everyone always tells you this, you're one step closer. You're one step closer. Getting names and rejecting them, or being rejected by them, is one step closer. So the story is with the Barditchev, Reb Levi Yitzchak Barditchev. Now, unfortunately, Reb Levi Yitzchak Barditchev's son, Reb Meir, passed away when he was very young, and Reb Levi Yitzchak raised his grandchildren, Reb Meir's children. So when the oldest grandchild came to the age of marriage, he told all the shadchanim in the area, all the relevant shadchanim, to give him suggestions, and he said, I will pay you for every suggestion. If there's a shidduch or not, I will pay you for every suggestion. Okay, great deal. The shadchanim were very excited. And of course, this is Reb Levi Yitzchak Barditchev's Einikel, this is Reb Levi Yitzchak Barditchev's grandson, so obviously they wanted, I think it was the son based on the story. Could have been a girl. So it seemed to me it was a boy. So they wanted to obviously make that shidduch, and all the shadchanim started sending him all these great, amazing names. And every single one, he did the same thing. He paid them for the suggestion, and he rejected the name. He paid them for the suggestion, he rejected the name. And this went on for quite a while. And all the shadchanim started to feel very uncomfortable. I mean, they're good people, good Jews, and we're taking money from Reb Levi Yitzchak Barditchev. Like, if you're taking money from some big business person who has lots of money and isn't maybe especially the best guy in the world, you don't mind, perhaps. But from a tzaddik who probably has no money, we're taking money for giving him names. We're not doing any work. We suggest a name. He says no, and he pays us. They feel very bad. So they all decide among themselves, that's it. We're done. We're not going to give him any more suggestions because we just feel really bad taking his money for nothing. So no more shulchan we're giving suggestions. So after a while, Reb Levi Yitzchak sees that no shulchan we're giving suggestions. What's the matter? Suddenly his grandchild no more suggestions came up. So he called the shulchanim together. He says, what's going on? Why it's been how much time it's been, and I haven't had one suggestion from any of you. What's going on? So they said, listen, Rav, we just doesn't feel right. If we give you suggestions and you're like everyone else and don't pay us for it, fine, we have no problem. We'll give you suggestions. If you give suggestions, you follow through and they get engaged and you pay us, of course. That's the business. That's our job. That's our zechus. But if we give you suggestions and you don't even accept the suggestion and you pay us, we should feel guilty. We feel guilty. How can we take your money for free? And again and again and again and again. We're not doing anything for you, and it's again and again. So that's it. We decided we're done. We're not giving any suggestions unless you're actually going to go out with a girl or you don't pay us for it. So Levi Yitzchak explained to them that every time a name is suggested, the person is one step closer to their bashert. He said because before the person is born, the bashert, the person they're destined to marry, is decided. And Reb Levi Yitzchak said, this isn't in my name, this is in Reb Levi Yitzchak's name, and this story was said by the Rebbe Rayat. So a tzaddik is saying a story about a tzaddik. So don't take this from me, but this is a tzaddik saying a story about a tzaddik. So Reb Levi Yitzchak said that that when the neshama is in Shamayim, when the person has not yet descended to this world, it's decided who their bashert is. And he said, there are many shadchanim in heaven. There are many angels that have good ideas who should get married to who. And Hashem decides. So shadchanim present, each different shadchan angel is presenting who they think should be the bashert, who should be the shidduch of this person, of this specific soul. And Hashem decides. But Rav Yitzchak said, but because all of these malachim had opinions, their opinions carried weight, even though they didn't materialize in actuality, and therefore, before a person can find their bashert, we have to go through all the malachim suggestions. We have to get past all the malachim's ideas until we get to the right one. And he said, and sometimes, this is all what Reb Levi Yitzchak Bar Yosef is telling Shulchan. He said, sometimes you see a shidduch is about to happen. They went out, they like each other, all is good, and last minute it falls apart. He said, you know why that happens? Because sometimes in Shamayim, before the person is born, there are two very strong contenders for the shidduch. Like two malachim that are really at it. This person is the best bashert. This person's the best bashert. And it's a real battle. Then, of course, in the end, Hashem decides whose qualities overweighs whose and who should become the real bashert. But obviously, each person had strong milas. Each one of the contenders, let's talk about it if it's a man and woman to make it simple for ourselves, each of these women had very strong, beautiful qualities. And each one of them made sense that they should get married to this person. But in the end, Hashem selected who's the true bashert. So sometimes when that happens, a person in this world almost marries, almost gets engaged to the one that almost made it in heaven but didn't, and therefore they go down. They have to mimic that process on planet Earth. And therefore he said, when you suggest a name, I am paying you for the name because you are doing me a favor. We're getting past all of these suggestions that were made in heaven that didn't pan out. I have to get through all of them until we get to the right one. So continue. I'm not going to embellish the story and say facts I don't know. So I don't know if a week later they made a shidduch or when it took or what happened. Ad kan, this is what I know of the story. But I thought it was very powerful because, of course, we always say that. And I'm sure you've heard the comment many times. Okay, you're one step closer. But a lot of times the words feel hollow. They don't feel very comforting. They don't feel like give you a good inner sense of it was good going out with that person. It was good. I mean, You know, I've seen this with myself, with girls sometimes, where it seems so perfect, like before you've even met him once, it seems so perfect. For sure, this is the right one. And so much effort and energy goes into arranging the shidduch, and then boom, something happens, and he never goes out with you. And he gets engaged to someone else instead. And it's like, what? It's like your chassan was snatched away. I mean, you never met him, but it already felt like he was your chassan. You already thought he was your chassan, and he got snatched away. What's going on? So this could be what's going on. This could be what's going on. So it's important not to get disillusioned, not to get depressed. If the process is long, it doesn't mean anything's wrong with you. Keep trying, remain positive, and your time will come. I wanted to share a few more spiritual segulas for finding your shidduch. Now, I do know, I believe 2 weeks ago, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, we went through specifically one segula, one thing that's very good to do to find a shidduch. And I'm not negating what I said then at all. I'm just adding these as other things that are brought in many different places. This everything I'm telling you here, though I'm not going to tell you the source, but they're all things that are written, all things that, you know, are clearly written, are good to finding a shidduch. I mean, these are all obviously good things in general, but these are all things that specifically help finding a shidduch. I'm going to give you, the truth is, when I prepared this, I first made a list of like 10 things. And I'm like, whoa, there's no point in doing this because I'm going to overwhelm you. So I'd rather give you a shorter list of things that I think are the most strong for my list. So I cut out like half the things. I think I had 10 and I cut it down to 5. But all 5 of these things are really strong, powerful tools, spiritual tools, not practical tools in our physical world, but practical tools in our spiritual world, the true world of finding a shidduch. One thing that it's written is to add in learning Torah. And it says that learning Torah directly relates to finding your bashert. 2, which sounds similar, but it's not the same thing, is to set specific times to learn Torah. Meaning, you could learn Torah. I mean, I hope everyone here does. Whatever, you know, when you have time or when it comes up. So there's a concept, I mean, you know, in Hebrew they call it kvias itzim b'Torah, to set a time. You learn right after shacharis, or you learn before you go to sleep, or you learn before supper. Or establishing a time gives Torah a certain solidity in your life. And that is considered a segula for finding a bashert. Strong bitachon in Hashem and in hashgacha pratis. It's interesting because we compare this process of a shidduch, I'm sure you've all heard this, is compared to kriyas yamsuf. That's what our sages say. Finding a shidduch or making a shidduch is kasha ke kriyas yamsuf, is as difficult as the splitting of the sea. And we're told that the splitting of the sea, the miracle of the splitting of the sea, happened because of the tremendous bitachon the Jews had, especially the women, that there would be this miracle, and therefore there was this miracle. So since our sages make this connection of kriyas yamsuf to a shidduch, and since there, the bitachon, the trust, the certainty that God would save them is what created that God did save them, so we're told also here. And this is huge. Constantly working on your bitachon, it will happen, and it will be the right one. It'll be the one I want. It'll be the one that's good for me. It's the one that will build a good life together. Strong, reinforce it. Bitachon really, really, really takes you far. A 4th thing, which is also very powerful, is helping someone else with a shidduch. Now, you could have a built-in situation here because we already said before that if you go out with someone and you don't want to continue, the most gracious way to stop is by suggesting another name. So imagine here you combine two advantages. You suggest a name because you don't want the person to have bad feelings for you, and at the same time you're helping someone find your shidduch. Imagine if that couple works out. And sometimes it really does, because sometimes you go out with someone and he's really a good guy, just not for you. And you even thought of someone, oh my gosh, he'd be great for her. I mean, I never want to marry her and I never want to marry him, but they'd be great for each other, and they really are. So it's really, really good to always think along those lines. Helping someone else find their shidduch is a great segula to finding your own shidduch. Obviously, Hashem works midah keneged midah. You help someone else find a shidduch, so Hashem will help you find your shidduch.
Well, what if it's like a red flag? Like you go on a date with someone who literally has a red
No,
flag.
no. I don't mean that. Chas v'shalom. If you go out with someone who like, I would not want to marry him because I see he's not a good person, don't set him up with someone that's not nice. Even
No, like
you don't say, well, she's also not a good person, so it's a good shidduch. No, don't do that. I meant what happens more commonly is that you go out with someone and he's a nice person. He's just not for you. You're not attracted, you're not interested, you realize your goals are not compatible. He's far more religious, you're far more religious. You want 1 trillion kids, or he wants 1 trillion kids, or he wants to go to university for the next 4 years and you would support him while he's getting his degree, and you're not willing to do that. I mean, there's lots of times when things come up in a shidduch that it's not that they're a bad person, they're just not for you. So you could say, oh my gosh, I have a friend that would love his vision, would work great. It's really worth it to suggest it. So in general, we said before, it's worthwhile to suggest it because that way he doesn't have any bad feelings about you, which we want to avoid at all costs, But I'm saying here, additionally, it's worthwhile to suggest it because one of the greatest schools for finding your shidduch is helping someone find their shidduch. Now, it doesn't have to be a person you went out with and said no to, or he said no to you. It could be any situation. I know some people are good at this. I know my second son's wife, before she was engaged herself, she made several shidduchim. I mean, it's just a personality. She's good at it. But it's really great skula for finding your chassan to help someone else find theirs. And I think nowadays they do say that it's, I don't know the numbers. I don't think anyone has a record of the numbers, but a lot of shidduchim are made by friends and acquaintances far more than are made by official shadchanim. And the last thing that I wanted to say, which is such a powerful tool that we always have at our disposal, is Tehillim. It says Tehillim draws down Hashem's kindness and compassion. We're told that if we really knew the power of Tehillim, we would say Tehillim all day long. But we don't, and we don't. But if a person is looking for a shidduch, it's very, very appropriate to say Tehillim. How much Tehillim? I don't know. A lot. Whatever a lot means. Say whatever for you is a lot of Tehillim. And when you're saying the Tehillim, have the intent, this should draw down kindness and compassion. I know for myself, happily married for many, many years, but I say a lot of Tehillim. And I try to stay focused. I'm not always focused, but I really try to remember it is so powerful. This is the only thing I know that it says this about it. That it literally draws down kindness and compassion. That literally, if we knew the power of Tehillim, we say Tehillim all day long. I don't know anything else it says about it like that. I can't think of anything. Obviously, there are many powerful tools. Unstuck is a powerful tool. And learning Torah is a powerful tool. But only about Tehillim does it say those words. So therefore, when you're in a troubled situation, say Tehillim. And if you don't see it help, say more Tehillim. Why do you think that's the Jewish thing that people do when they're in trouble? There's a reason for it. So you can say, I'm not in trouble. I'm just looking for my bashert. Right, so you're not in trouble, God forbid. But if you would like to expedite the process, say so. And then say some more. And get into the habit of saying Tehillim. And when you're married, you could keep saying the Tehillim. When you have children, it's not like when you get married, suddenly you have no more needs. It's the opposite. They grow. There's always more, there's always more that you need Hashem's kindness and compassion. So it's a good Jewish womanly thing to do to get in the habit of saying a lot of Tehillim. And I'm saying in this situation. So I listed 5 segulas. I'm going to review them briefly just because I'm saying honestly, I really wrote out a whole list and I think I chucked it in half. Because I thought if I give you so many things, it'll be too overwhelming to pick. So I'm going to make it shorter and I'm going to pick the most powerful tools. So these are the 5 most powerful from my whole long list of, might have been more than 10. Adding and learning Torah, establishing times to learn Torah, strong bitachon, strong trust in Hashem and in Hashgacha Pratis, in the divine providence, helping someone else find their soulmate, and lots and lots and lots and lots of Tehillim. So you don't have to do all 5, but it's worthwhile to pick something that, could be your spiritual hishtadlus. Obviously, that doesn't take away the need for a physical hishtadlus, but it's good to have spiritual hishtadlus as well.
Wait, sorry, what was the second one?
The second one was establish times when you learn Torah. It's a concept in Torah study. It's called kvius itim. That there's a concept that we should have the time when we learn. It should be fixed. On Mondays and Thursdays at this time is when I do this learning, instead of it just being haphazard. Because when it's sort of haphazard in your brain, its effect is less. And when there's a fixed time, it also has a different impact on you.
Do classes count for that? Like if you
course.
put it on your calendar that like you have a Navi class this.
Of course, that's kvius itim. That's absolute kvius itim. You have a day, you have a time when you go and study. Of course. Okay. Absolutely. Okay. When you're doing research, jumping to a different topic, and you're asking questions, I know we've said this many times, never ask yes, no questions, never ask questions where they obviously know the answer that you want, because that's the answer they're going to give you. But I just want to add this point, which again, I just think is really important. I might have said it before, but I wasn't sure that I did say it clearly enough, and it's a very good tool for doing research. Whatever the issue is, always, I mean, obviously, hopefully you're not the one doing research yourself, but whoever's doing research, please tell them to do this. Ask for examples. Like if you would say, tell me his 3 top qualities. You say, oh, he's so kind. He's so organized. He has such yiras shamayim. Okay, those are beautiful qualities. Can you give me an example of each one? You could even be mean and say, could you give me 2 examples of each one? Now, if it takes them a long time to come up with an example, that's a little disconcerting. But you're probably not going to just ask one person when you do research. So if you ask 3 people and 2 people had examples off the top of their head and one person had a long time till he could come up with it, I wouldn't worry. I would assume it's just this person, and his personality is hard for him to think of examples. But if everyone had a hard time coming up with examples of how he's a kind person or how he has yiras shamayim or how he's so organized, I would worry. I would be concerned. Now again, it could be all of these people are not good at examples, but you know, like it shouldn't be that hard to think of examples if officially you know the person well. Tell me how he handles disappointment or failure. And they say, oh, you know, he's so wonderful. Yes, sorry, I said not that you should be making the call, but this is what you're going to coach the person who's making the call to say. So tell me how he handles disappointment and failure. They say, oh, you know, he's very impressive. He keeps his calm. He doesn't lose it. He's understanding. He learns from his mistakes. I don't know, you can say lots of beautiful things. Oh, great. Can you give me an example? They can't give you an example, so everything they just said was garbage. So you always want to ask for examples. And it's very, very important. And they shouldn't have to fumble around a long time until they think of something. Again, if they really don't know him, then they would have said they don't know him in the first place. But if you know him enough to tell me he's a yiras shamayim, you should be able to give me an example of how you realize he was a yiras shamayim. If you know him enough to say he's a kind person, you should have off the top of your head so many examples of his kindness. So yes, I hope you don't have to do the research yourself, but whoever doing the research, this is a very important tool to use when researching, because it really, to me, shows, is it true or not? And honestly, the examples make the person a person. Like so often you hear these generic words and it's like everyone's kind and everyone's organized and everyone's compassionate and everyone has yiras shamayim and everyone's caring, and when you hear the stories, it gets a sense of who the person really is. Even within these traits, there's lots of different colors and flavors to kindness, and colors and flavors to yiras shamayim, and colors and flavors to goal-oriented or organized or loves children. All of these are beautiful things, but when you hear the stories, it gets you a sense of what he is going to be like. And that's why this is a really good thing. So both, it shows, is it true or not? Like, did the person make it up or does he really believe it? And it gives you a much better insight into the person himself. So it's worth it, again, trying to create questions that they don't know what you want. But even if they do know what you want, always going back to give me an example, give me an example, give me an example. Okay, we got like a minute left. Just a few little odds and ends to throw in here. If you want him to open up, this is when you're going out, the best thing is to open up yourself. Usually this elicits him as well. If it doesn't elicit him, that also could be a sign. Now, it could be a sign of any number of things. It could be a sign he's hiding things. It could be a sign he's a closed person. It could be a sign he's reticent. It doesn't necessarily mean he's hiding things when he doesn't open up, but it's definitely a sign of something. Especially if you're doing it in a sincere way, then it usually evokes the other person. When you're going out in terms of clothing, you should wear nice things, not too casual and not too fancy. Because if it's too casual, sometimes it insults the boy. The boy feels, what? Especially, I flew into Chicago for you. I'm spending all this money on you. I'm spending this time on you. And you couldn't even get dressed up like it's a important occasion. So it sometimes sends a bad message. Not for all boys, but some boys definitely interpret it that way. At the same time, if you're really dressed beautifully, a lot of times you just feel fake and unnatural. And also, for him, it could seem fake and unnatural. So therefore, you got to figure out exactly what are your shidduch outfits that exactly are in between those two things. That you look beautiful without looking overdone. And it's fine to look like you took time to look beautiful, because that's giving him a compliment that you value this enough to take time. And I've definitely heard from more than one boy, when a girl comes and looks like she couldn't care less, like I'm not gonna say rolled out of bed, but rolled out of her job, rolled out of teaching or her therapy work, whatever she was doing, and just showed up, it's sort of like they feel sort of insulted. Don't get engaged, ideally, unless you're 100% sure, not 90%, but 100%. Because engagement is hard, as we've said before, and therefore the foundation has to be really healthy. Like if you're 100% sure, it's easier when you're going crazy and thinking you made a mistake, as almost every kala at a certain point thinks she made a mistake. That's so normal to think you made a mistake. But you still have that foundation that you were 100% sure. So it sort of reassures you that you're just a little crazy now because you're a kala. And you think of all your friends that were crazy when they were kalas. So it's normal. But if you were 90% sure, not 100%, it's sometimes the doubts get bigger and bigger and bigger. And just last little point.
All right. Is it bad to
Sure,
just not have a wedding?
I'm sorry? Is it bad what?
To not actually have a wedding? Because remember how you said before, it's not really good to have a lot of people at your chuppah, or
that's why COVID's such a great situation, yeah.
So it's better to just not really have a wedding. Only the chuppah part, and not tell people when it is, so that even the bad thoughts, so that when I guess it is that, because you said thoughts have power. So if they're thinking at the same time,
I don't think that's how Hashem wants you to do it. You don't have to have this big ostentatious wedding where half of Chicago has to be invited, but there is the concept for sure. You'd want a minyan by the Suda, at least, which is a very small amount. I was at because of COVID, I had 2 relatives' weddings that were in Chicago recently, like sisters. And the first one, I think there were 75 people at the wedding because both sides were from Chicago. And the second one, there were 40 people at the wedding because only the girl side was from Chicago. And it really felt the difference. The 75 one felt totally normal, even though this family probably normally have had 350 people at their wedding, 400 people, they would have had a lot of people. Both sides are very connected to a lot of people in Chicago. So it had been this massive wedding for sure. But 75 people felt great. It felt like a normal wedding. Okay, it was small, but it wasn't low cluster. It wasn't lacking anything. It felt totally normal in everything, even though, of course, it was very small. But the wedding that there was 40 people at, there might even have been 50. It felt really intently small, oppressively small. You felt the smallness very, very, very strongly. Like you felt bad to leave. It's at a wedding. It's getting late. You gotta go. You felt really bad to leave because, how could you walk out when there's 40 people in the room? So it was really a different feeling. But everything is relative. But our chachamim definitely want you to rejoice at your wedding. Now, again, you could say rejoicing for me would be having my family and 5 closest friends. Great. Beautiful. But whatever it means for you, there's definitely the concept of simchas chasam v'kala. It's definitely part of Judaism. It's definitely a time where the Shekhinah is shining. It's definitely, we want to celebrate great things. So I wouldn't say don't have people because you're scared their energy is going to harm you. Rather, hopefully, the people there should be in a space to not, and it doesn't hurt if the MC at the chuppah says something, I always said I'm going to do that at my children's weddings, but I didn't do it yet. Just to remind the people that their thoughts should be going in the right direction. But I don't think you should not have people at a wedding or not celebrate a party because you're scared. I think it's good to celebrate. It's an important, beautiful thing, and it's worth celebrating. It's worth rejoicing in. You found your soulmate. That's supremely important. That's amazing. All your children in Shemayim that haven't been born yet are upstairs rejoicing. You should also be rejoicing. But it's fine to have, if for you 20 people would be great, have 20, have 30. Whatever the number is that you're happy with, have. You don't have to have hundreds of people to rejoice with, but you should celebrate.
Wait, but a lot of people aren't having seudas because, maybe now, but like in the beginning, I know when COVID first started and people were still getting married, they didn't really do seudas. Is that a problem?
Everything that was done then, I'm sure, was done with a Rav's haskama, with how Rav said was the right thing. And that was the reality of that situation, just like a bris also. The bris also didn't have a minyan, in the early days of COVID, in March and April and May. You had the father, you had the mayo, you had the sandik, and that was it. Nobody else came. Everything else was virtual. But that's not how it's supposed to be. That was just in that situation when there's this fear of as we call it, pandemic, and our Chachamim call it a magefa, a plague. So we do unusual things in unusual situations. So it was really, I remember when it happened, in March and April and May, whatever point, we would make jokes about my son's bar mitzvah. And it only was a joke because his bar mitzvah is in Kislev. Well, lo and behold, his bar mitzvah is coming up in Kislev, and I don't know what we still haven't decided what we're doing for it, because what are we going to do now? I think Corona's worse in Chicago now than it was in March. But that's a pandemic situation. It's not like this is a normative way to celebrate a bar mitzvah or a bris or a chasana. So if that's hashgacha project, Baruch Hashem, the couple's happy they're married. That's all they care about. But sometimes it can be very beautiful. I know my mechatenista, meaning my son's sister-in-law and her husband, they got married in Israel, like in March, right before Pesach. And I think Israel at that time, I don't know how many people they allowed to be together for a simcha. I don't remember what it was. They had the wedding in her parents' home. But they made it so wedding-like. It was so beautiful. Like all the money they didn't put in a hall, they put in their home. They really made it beautiful and decorated it. And they had a band there. I was shocked. They're gonna have a band there. You had like 15 people, 20 people maybe. Like maybe 10 men and 10 women. They had a band. And they had flowers and they had beautiful food. And everyone got dressed up in all the gowns that they had purchased before, and they really made it very beautiful. So, it's each point as it is. When my cousin of mine in New York, this was the first time they did in Crown Heights in honor of their wedding. So they were like the whole time, what's going to be? And it was also, they got married before Pesach. I remember a certain point when everything else was canceled. And at that time, it seemed so plausible. My cousin's wife sent out, a WhatsApp letter saying that we're rescheduling the party to Lag Baimer. Because of course, by Lag Baimer, all this is over, right? Like no question, by Lag Baimer, it'll be normal. So they had a chuppah, and then after the chuppah, they got into this beautiful rented car, and they drove up and down the streets of Crown Heights at like a car parade. And all the people came out and sang for them and danced for them, and like it was so beautiful. The girls, she went to her grandmother's house. Her grandparents didn't come to the chuppah, and the grandma was on the top of the steps. You can imagine these New York homes with lots and lots and lots of steps. So the grandma was on the top, and the granddaughter's on the bottom, and the grandmother's like dancing for her granddaughter. It was really emotional. It was really beautiful. They felt like stars. It was a very, very beautiful wedding. So everything in its right time. Last little point I wanted to add. When you're going out, and this sometimes is difficult, so I'm putting it out there, not saying it's easy, but I feel it's important. until you know you get to a certain point where you're going out that you know you're going to get engaged. You know you're getting engaged. Maybe we have to go out 1 or 2 more times, but you know you're getting engaged. But until that time, don't tell him things that you wouldn't want someone knowing who's not your husband. And that's sometimes a very hard thing, because you're trying to see if he should be your husband, and definitely opening yourself up is a process of him opening himself up. And if you want him to go deeper, you have to go deeper. If you want him to be more personal, you have to be more personal. All that's 100% true. And I'd be the first one to tell you everything I just said. But at the same time, you have to make a discrimination of like, what is information I don't want someone walking around knowing about me if I'm not married to them. Whatever that information is, don't tell them, even though it seems to be going beautifully, until you reach that point where you know you're going to be engaged or you are engaged. Don't share those pieces that you wouldn't want anyone else knowing. Because we all have parts of ourselves that are very, very, very private. And sometimes girls or boys share them in the process of going out, and then it doesn't work out. And then like they feel very sort of exposed and violated. Not that the other person has anything wrong to them. They share the information, but they still feel like exposed and violated because someone's walking around with their personal information. So it's really hard sometimes to like be able to discriminate, what should I share, what should I not share, when should I share, when do I go the next level deeper in my really personal private life, as we all have a personal private life, personal traumas, personal fears, personal things that happen in our life. We all have it, but you have to really be screening it with the thought of, if this doesn't work out, I wouldn't want someone else walking around with this information, and therefore that I'm not going to share yet. Okay, a little bit overtime, but not too much. So thank you all for joining. Again, if you have any other questions, you can feel free to ask me now, or to chat them, or to send me a WhatsApp.
Yeah, I actually have a question. So when I was on a shidduch date, the man asked me, the bashert said, asked me a question about something I did, like when I went to Israel, like he asked me about something, and I didn't want to tell him the truth because I was like, I don't really know you, and I don't think this is going to go anywhere. But is it wrong then to like say the, like,
Lie?
say, oh, yeah. So it's not like trying to be like, I just didn't open up to him and tell him about my life, because I felt like, why should I, because I'm not planning on going out with you, because he was the one that was like looking at other girls. So I was like, I know I'm not going to go out with you again, so why should I tell you things? You know what I mean?
That's a great question. You shouldn't lie, and you don't have to say the truth, and you could say, I prefer not to talk about it now. Maybe it's something we could discuss at a later time. Or you could be evasive and say something more like, I don't really remember the details, it was a long time ago. It's like if someone calls me about a shidduch for a girl, and if I don't have nice things to say, I don't want to say not nice things, but I don't want to lie. So I always say, I don't really remember her so well. I feel that's like the most appropriate answer. I hope that's considered appropriate in Hashem's eyes. Like, I don't really remember. I usually actually say I don't remember, because that doesn't even feel so honest. I more say, it was a long time ago. So like, everything was so long ago. I don't, I think anything I'm going to tell you is not relevant because it was so long ago. And I just don't think I'm a good reference. I really think you should call someone else. And I don't exactly remember. I had a lot of girls in the school, and I went through a lot of girls. I don't really remember. So I would say something along those lines. If someone asked you a question, I don't think you should lie, because you don't want to bring anything negative into the concept of a shidduch, and lying is a big evil. And you don't want, like, God forbid, me to connect me to someone to lie to you about something significant in shidduchim. So I don't think you should lie, but I don't think you have to just disclose yourself. And I think you could practice in advance a tactful way to say, mind your own business. Something along the lines of, I don't really remember, or whatever, and then just change the topic of conversation. Unless he's really an idiot, he's not going to pursue it. He might be wondering, but you don't really care because you're anyway not interested in him. It's more, what if you were interested in him, but you don't want to start saying personal things when you've only gone out like twice, or you don't want to say things that he would look at in a negative way if you only gone out twice and you are interested in him. Then it's harder to, in a tactful way, not answer the question. If you're not interested in him, it's easy to pull him off.
How do you do it? Like, if you're, okay, let's say interested, you don't want to like say things, disclose your past or whatever.
So he would say, when you were in Israel, like, how many guys did you go out with? And you don't want to talk about it. You don't want to turn him off. You could say along those lines, it was a long time ago. All those details are very blurred in my brain. And then use it as a segue to go into how blurred your brain is about something else.
No, he literally asked me if I went on which group to Israel, because I went on Taglit. So he asked me if I was with girls and boys or just girls. And I said just girls because I didn't want to talk about it. I felt comfortable with him, so I didn't say anything. So is that so that's wrong, obviously, but then how do you deflect from that and say,
well, I don't know if it's such a wrong thing to say. You're not talking about something you did wrong. You were saying this was the group I went on. That's where I was holding them. I went on, I don't know which the groups are, but you could say I went on the mixed group. That's where I was holding then. I wouldn't make that choice today, but that was a choice I made then. And move on. It's not a big deal. It's not saying something you explicitly did wrong, but I'm saying if he asks you a question, that the answer would be something you explicitly did that he would not approve of. Again, you're going to eventually tell him that information, but you might not want him to know it on the second time. And that's when you have to think of a nice way to just sort of waffle around the issue. I don't remember, it was a long time ago. I'm a little blurry about that time in my life. I've made a lot of changes since then. Things that aren't saying I was an angel, but things that aren't telling him any specific information. He'd probably get the point, but you're not saying anything, and I definitely would not lie. Just remember, anything like that, it could come right back at you. If I'm lying about a shidduch, I'm going to be lied to about a shidduch in a very critical way.
But even if it's not going anywhere?
So what? Still part of a shidduch. No. I would be very careful. I would be even more careful, to be honest, in a shidduch than in other situations. We should always be careful to be honest, because you don't want anyone being dishonest to you in a shidduch. Right? We know Hashem operates mida keneged mida, so we have to be very careful. Now so you're moving on. Your truth is going to be that you'll probably be in a sticky situation in the future and you're going to be honest. So don't worry, Hashem will make sure to test you on it. He always does. But I would say in general, don't be dishonest. It doesn't mean you have to have a full disclosure, but you have to say things in such a way, let's say he's asking you about your relationship with your parents. And let's say it's not so great. And you don't want to tell him about it. Like, you're going to tell him about it. You just don't want to tell him about it. It's like the first time you met him or the second time, and you don't want him to know this yet. You're not in Paris. You're not doing anything wrong. It's just not such a great relationship. And you don't need to share it with someone who you're only on your second time. It's fine to say, oh, that's like a pretty heavy topic. I think we should table it for later. Or that's a pretty long topic. It's already, it's too late for me to start such a topic now, but I'd love to talk about it, in the future. You're allowed to say things like that. Don't lie, but you don't have to directly answer something that you're not comfortable answering.
Riverton, I'd like to share something about now. So I am married now, but I want to just share something that I think the other people might appreciate. So when I used to be, it was very difficult for me to open up and to share about myself, and I'm a very private person, so it took a long time for me to open up, and therefore it was difficult for the boys to get to know me also. And then I always felt when they did get to know me, they didn't really like me, and that made me not want to open up even more. But then when I was dating the man who's now my husband, for the first time, I felt like he asked me quite tough questions, and I just felt this calmness, and I felt like I could be open and honest with him. And the whole time I was kind of like expecting him to be like, okay, the date is not over, I'm gonna go home. And he was just listening and didn't interrupt me, and just accepted me and gave me the safe space to be myself and to be honest with him. And that's really like that's how I knew that he was the right person for me. So I just want to give that as an encouragement to people who are dating, to say, you know, you don't have to be worried about when the right person comes. It's going to be easy to be honest with them and to share those kind of things with them. But I definitely
Such a
think,
beautiful story, Miriam.
thank you.
Wow. I thank you for
Yeah.
sharing that. That is so
Oh,
beautiful.
you're welcome.
That
But
is so touching.
I
Really,
do
so
also,
touching.
thank you. I do also think it is important to kind of like keep certain things private for yourself, and not to, you know, because like for your own respect. I think that's what we discussed too. There's certain things that you need to kind of like guard to yourself, that you don't have to share with everyone. And just because someone's asking the questions, it's not their information, it's your information. So you don't have to share information that you don't feel comfortable with.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And
Okay.
that's why I'm saying you can make some nice sentence, even say, you know, I don't think we're at this point in the relationship we should be talking about these things. That's fine. And move on, like with a smile, nicely. No big deal. You're not insulted. Like, turn the tables. You're not insulted that they asked you this inappropriate question. So they just feel a little bad that they asked you an inappropriate question, and we keep moving. So 100%. But that's such a beautiful story. I'm going to remember it, shelve it in my brain, because that's so nice. I don't know if Hashem helps everyone on the level that he did for you, but that's so beautiful. That's really beautiful to that. And that was such a great sign to know he was the right one.
Yes, definitely. And now also, like throughout, like, I mean, we haven't been married that long, but we've always been able to be honest and open with each other, and also the way he, whatever I share with him, the way he accepts it and gives me this safe space is just, it's not like I've never seen anything like it. It's amazing. So yeah, I'm very grateful to Hashem for showing me to him. And I mean, I'm older, and I'm, you know, I'm a convert, so there was a lot of things that made Shidduchim difficult, but it's all worth it at the end when you find the right one.
What I always tell people is, because people sometimes think of the strikes against them. You're older, you're a convert. I could give you a long list of people that have many more strikes that they think about. And in the end of the day, it doesn't make a difference, because you have your bashert. There's one for you. There's one for every person out there. Every person has a bashert. Every person has a soulmate. So if somebody officially doesn't have any strikes, they might have to go through a lot more people till they get to their soulmate. And for someone else, where like 50 people wouldn't want to go out with you, great. You just saved yourself 50 wasted nights, because they're not your soulmate. Your soulmate will go out with you. Your soulmate will be there for you. And that's true for every person. Every person should always remember that whatever they view as the strikes against them, they have a soulmate. They have a soulmate, and they will find him. He actually, you're the girl, so he will find you. He's supposed to be finding you. He will find you.
What about the girls or men and women that don't get married?
I know someone who never got married, and he would joke about himself. He said, my shver died childless. So, you know, there went his shidduch. If a person never marries their bashert, both people have to come back into this world to get married to each other. In other words, you and your soulmate, if you never married, you know, whatever else happened in your life, there could be lots of different things happen, but if you never married your soulmate, then both parties who never married their soulmate have to come back in a reincarnation to marry each other. That's the Kabbalistic answer to that question.
There's 7 soulmates, so like let's say your soulmate already married someone else, because
so you also have, you both have. There's 7 potential soulmates. So you have yours, he has his. So which one of so if neither of you married each other, which one comes back? I mean, I'll let God figure that one out. But there is that person that if anytime a Jew gets married to a person they are halachically allowed to marry, that's their soulmate. In other words, if a kohen marries a woman who was in any one of those inappropriate situations we mentioned, that's not a soulmate. They're not allowed to marry each other. If a Jew is with a non-Jew, it's not a soulmate. They're not allowed to marry each other. if a mamzer is with a non-mamzer, it's not a soulmate. They're not allowed to marry each other. But anytime two Jews are married together that are allowed to marry each other, that first marriage is their soulmate. They got married. But if someone never married someone who they're allowed to marry, they never married their soulmate. So they have to come back in a Gilgul, and their soulmate has to come back. So which of the 7 does God pick as the 2 that have to come back to each other? I mean, that's his calculation, but they both come back to get married.
And then what about divorce?
It's that important. It's that important. You could divorce your soulmate. No, nobody says you're not going to divorce your soulmate. Divorce has a lot to do with many other factors. But the first Jewish person you marry that you are halachically allowed to marry is your bashert. That is what's written clearly in the Gemara. No question.
Is the second one a soulmate too? Like, let's say the first one was
Not necessarily. The second one could be a soulmate, because as you said, there's more than one soulmate, but it's not necessarily a soulmate. The second one, the Gemara says, is according to what you deserve. Your soulmate is not necessarily according to what you deserve. It's your soulmate. And the second one might be your soulmate, might not be your soulmate, but is according to what you deserve. But a soulmate a divorce is never a sign. I know some people misconstrue this concept. Oh, well, that wasn't my real soulmate because we couldn't live together. No, there was a certain avodah that had to be done, which was or wasn't done. But it doesn't take away the fact that if this was a halachically valid marriage, this was your soulmate. You might have a better marriage with your second husband, but that doesn't take away that the first one we know was your soulmate. Possibly the second one's your soulmate. We don't know. But we know the first one was your soulmate.
That's scary to think.
There's a lot of avodah Hashem sometimes wants from us. He'd be like, that's my soulmate? Him? You know, Hashem sometimes is pulling on us a lot.
Because I can think of people who were like in abusive marriage and stuff, like, and their first marriage, and that's crazy to think that that's their soulmate.
It doesn't take it away. And it doesn't take away that there was any problem with getting divorced. Obviously, if someone's in an abusive marriage, they should get out. But that doesn't take away the fact that it was a soulmate. It doesn't remove the fact that it was a soulmate. And a soulmate means, in the world of potential, this could have been the right marriage. But it didn't happen. You know, it speaks of Yaakov hiding Dinah in the box. So Esau shouldn't see her, because he knew if he saw her, he would want her, he would take her. And then it says, because that Yaakov hid Dinah in the box, that's why Dinah was taken by Shechem, that really Dinah should have married Esau and would have had the power to refine him. But do you think she wanted to be married to Esau? Of course not. So let's take a Dinah who was married to an Esau. My gosh, what a horrific, horrible tragedy. But maybe she's exactly the soulmate that is needed to rectify that Esau. Again, not saying Yaakov did anything wrong, not saying Dinah did anything wrong, but just saying things are far more complex than we understand. And the fact that it's a hard marriage, or that the marriage tremendously requires enormous work, more than you possibly can imagine investing in a marriage, doesn't mean it's not a soulmate. It means this is a person who's holding part of your soul, and you're holding part of you two together. What soulmate means, that literally it's like you're two parts of one soul. But maybe he has gone through so much trauma, or gone through such horrific things, who knows, that he's so unhealthy, and you don't have the tools to help him, or it would just take kaichos. You just cannot possibly imagine investing in a marriage. But it doesn't take. It's not taking. It's not guilt. It's not a problem. This isn't Catholicism. Divorce is an option if needed. But it doesn't take away the truth that this is a soulmate. That is exactly what it says, clearly.
What about when one of the couple, like one of the partners, the woman or the man, was married before, or vice versa, you know, like one of them was married and the other one wasn't?
Right. So that will be a case where you know that it's a soulmate, because the other one wasn't married. If he was married before and she wasn't, this is her first marriage. Therefore, it's her soulmate. Well, if he's her soulmate, she's his soulmate. So he was fortunate to marry his soulmate the second time also, which sometimes happens and sometimes doesn't happen.
And the same thing around, like if it's a man who never got married.
Yeah, same situation. Same situation. Your first marriage is your soulmate. So for whoever the couple is, it doesn't make a difference. If one of them is their first marriage and halachically they're allowed to be married to each other, then this is a soulmate. You already were married to your soulmate. Well, as you said, there could be 7 soulmates. So that's not a problem. It's not guaranteed your second time is going to be your soulmate, but it's not saying it can't be. So in that situation, it's very obvious that it is a soulmate. Because for the other party, it's clearly their soulmate. So it's got to work in both directions. But again, this is not taking away the fact that a get is, it says the Mizbeach cries tears, and it's a kosher option if that's the right way to go. And obviously sometimes it is the right way to go. It's not blaming anyone. It's not saying the person, if they'd been a better wife, he would have been a better husband. Like, we're not saying that. Things are very big and very complex sometimes. And there's many couples that their second marriage is far better than their first. Now they're older and they're wiser and they have tools they didn't have the first time around. They have a different set of priorities and standards. They chose more wisely. Obviously, all that can happen. Wait, he was my soulmate. This one, I don't think it's my soulmate, but it's a much better marriage. You can have a better marriage with someone who's not your soulmate. There's nothing that says you can't. You can have a hard marriage with someone who's your soulmate. There's nothing that says you can't. It's just the concept of literally your bashert, your soulmate.
So is it better to be in a marriage with someone who isn't or is your soulmate?
If it's an abusive marriage, you should get out.
But what does it mean if they're not your soulmate and you're married to them?
It's fine. There's nothing wrong. You don't have to be married to your soulmate. Don't worry about it. It's a nice, I was going to say, don't overrate the concept or underrate the concept. It is a spiritual truth. It's a very significant thing that 2 halves of the soul fuse together. And at the same time, Hashem allows divorce. And at the same time, it is very possible that the second marriage will be better because you're more prepared, because you learned from your mistakes. You know, you're going to be a better wife and he's going to be a better husband and you're going to pick more wisely and all those things will work out better. And it's possible the second person is your soulmate. And it's possible he isn't. And don't make yourself crazy over it. You leave those things to Hashem. You're allowed to marry someone who's not your soulmate. It's not, it's like, don't worry about it. It's not relevant. It's not relevant in terms of saying, therefore, I'm in a very bad marriage, but I shouldn't get out because he's my soulmate. If you're in a very bad marriage and the husband's abusive, you should definitely get out. And yes, he's your soulmate. And yes, you should get out. No question. No question about it at all.
Where did the 7 come from? I'm sorry, I must have
It says that in the Zohar. It says in the Zohar that there's 7 potentials. That's why it says there's a halakha. It's actually the Zohar, but it's also in the Talmud. The Zohar expounds on it more because the Talmud has a halakha that the Zohar is explaining. And in the Talmud, it says that a person is allowed to get engaged on Chol Hamoed. It's a question if you're allowed to get engaged on Chol Hamoed. And you're allowed to get engaged on Chol Hamoed because maybe if you don't, another guy's going to chop her before you. So you don't want to lose out this opportunity, so you're allowed to get engaged on Chol Hamoed. That's what it says in the Gemara. And the Zohar explains this idea. Well, what do you mean another guy's going to get her before you? If she's your bashert, she's your bashert. It's like, you don't have to worry about that. No, there's 7 basherts. But again, these concepts are interesting. These concepts are not to be something that impedes us, practically speaking. You could have a horrible marriage with a soulmate. You could have an amazing marriage with someone who isn't your soulmate. And maybe a second marriage, you are going to be married to your soulmate, and you'll never know, and it doesn't make a difference. Don't worry about it. Let Hashem run his world. We don't run his world. If it's important that my second marriage is a soulmate, Hashem will make sure he is. I can't guarantee you, but I can guarantee that Hashem knows what he's doing. So we trust him. We don't run the world. He does. If I need my soulmate, he'll make sure he's my soulmate. Wow. Well, it's really late. Sorry. Sometimes I feel, just a note for future reference, if it's after 9:30 and someone's asking a question and you've got to go, I never am insulted when people walk off on me, virtually or in person. It truly never bothers me. I've been doing this for way too long. And if it did bother me, I wouldn't be able to do this at all. So it never bothers me. And but I do hope that this conversation was meaningful and beneficial. in all of these details. And again, maybe for you or maybe for someone else. You never know when you gain information who it's for. It could be for you, it could be for someone else, it could be for both. Thank you so much for joining. And the Hashem, tell your friends about the class. I don't know. I'm like somebody else around single that needs this information, or maybe they're getting it all from you, so it's okay. Anyway, have a wonderful week. Thank you so much for coming. Be well.
Thank you for answering.
Sure, absolutely, no problem. Absolutely. Be well.
You too. Bye. Thank you.